there's a lot of install base of our light industrial systems. There's hundreds of thousands currently in operation. Our heavy industrial, there are tens of thousands currently in operations, but it is largely in industries outside of automotive. If you go to an automotive manufacturer, you'll probably see plasma equipment in their maintenance departments, not necessarily in production. But you're going to see some fiber laser for it, especially for this thin, sheet metal tape applications.
Mhm.
So fiber laser, they're familiar with fiber laser. The industry is familiar. We are bringing them up to speed on what plasma technology is, what it can do for them, but there's always a question of, that sounds too good to be true, so we need to prove it. So what we're finding is that versus fiber laser, again, these larger parts, there's going to be a lot of part variance when they're coming out of the mold. The big difference is that fiber laser has to have like a 1 millimeter standoff from the torch to the part itself, where plasma has much greater standoff, around 6 millimeters. Well,
Hmm.
it's more robust. There won't be collisions. If a fiber laser head collides with a part, it's not good. For plasma, has enough 6 millimeters. It'll accommodate all those part variances and surface features without colliding. And if you look at cut quality, plasma is superior over fiber laser in these particular applications.
Yeah, I think also that 5 millimeter difference doesn't sound too much. But as we all know, we already had it also in the podcast about geometric variations. When you take such a big part out of your tool, you're off a few millimeters, and just gravity alone has an impact on your distances.
Yeah.
And then if you're bound by 1 millimeter, then you first have to scan the part and then exactly adjust your process. But with 6 millimeters, you're pretty sure you get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can offset, and you can combat that 1 millimeter, but all you're doing is adding cost to the cell, right? So the equipment's more costly, the consumables more costly, the gases required are more costly. Lasers like cleaner environments. And I think operationally, I don't think there really are any gains to what you can receive out of laser. Laser has its place, and there's a lot of places where it can threaten plasma business. But we have seen, and we've challenged laser, and we've had customers challenge us with laser, and the practicality and the ease of use that plasma brings is hard for laser to touch.
But you're not newcomers in automotive. You already have a bunch of installations out there, right? So if I buy a car today, there's a quite probably that some part is actually treated with a plasma.
What's the number, Russ? What's the number? You like to say?
Yeah, so we're estimating at least in last year, at least 1 million cars were cut using a plasma system. So, and a lot of installations globally. Dozens.
And you
in
see
production.
an increase in installations, or
Absolutely, especially if you coincide that with the huge compounded annual growth rate for high pressure die casting systems, which is leading this trend, and that's well into the upper 40s, is what third parties are saying is the CAGR for that industry. So we're riding that wave.
But where do you find that? Not in Europe. You find it in the US or Asia or both?
I think we're seeing it globally. I mean, Asia is certainly leading the adoption rate. They're 2 to 3 years ahead of us in the industry, automotive industry, moving in that direction for sure.
Because if we compare notes here, my strongest market is actually, I would say, Japan. Not in number of sales, but in organization and seriousness and how they actually take on to this. Then it's actually the US that they seem to dare to do things in the good old America. And then you have the copy machines in China, and then you have Europe. And Europe, we are a discussion club with a lot of committees. And I mean, trying to bring something new to Europe, I would definitely start in, I don't know what you call it, Dearborn, Chicago, San Francisco, before even going to Eurogas in Deutschland.
Yeah, so there are innovators, and that we're seeing that in Asia, a lot of innovators, and then there's the early adopters. I think EMEA or Europe, as you're describing, might be late adopters or even laggards. It's just taking longer. So we're definitely seeing that, but we have to cross it. The early innovators, they have to jump that chasm to early adopters, and I think that's where we're at now.
Yeah.
Is again back to my statement. It's that's great. That's too good to be true. Now prove it. So that's what we're going through, and the automotive industry is like that big ship that is really hard to turn. So, but that ship is definitely turning its rudder and starting to shift.
Yeah.
I mentioned the high CAGR for high pressure die casting. We're hearing that it's 2-year lead times, on this equipment, and they've taken a lot of orders. Now it's just trying to get caught up in all that backlog and get it to the industry, and it's also a shift for the automotive companies who, because again, the trend to larger parts, that logistics, the part size, shipping costs, all that plays into this. So I think automotive manufacturers are looking to bring this in-house, in-line production, building new facilities, and that takes time to build up that infrastructure. And I think that's what
It does
seeing
for
now.
sure. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to the US, to South Carolina, for example, it's not that super difficult to buy some land close to a car manufacturer. But if you go to the car manufacturing in Wolfsburg in Germany and say, hello, I want to place a foundry here wall to wall, because I'm going to toss in those gigacastings to the production line, they have a problem. So there is actually physical limitations that I think is hindering Europe as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think where you've seen the early adopters, it's green space. They're operating from a green space.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
what you're talking about, a lot of the traditional, let's just say, U.S. automakers that are well established, yeah, they've got a lot of real estate already established in Michigan and Indiana and in Ohio, and to revamp those manufacturing lines is an extremely difficult process with something new like this. So they really need to understand what it's going to do for their operations and what they're willing to invest to make those changes. Because you're right. You can go all to South Carolina, Georgia, and buy up some land and start new. And it's going to be much easier for you to do that and install those pieces of equipment than as if you have some millions and millions of dollars of existing facility, and now you gotta not only keep production going, but now you got to retool what you're doing. So much different conversations between who the early adopters are and what they have available to them from a manufacturing site.
We call them no legacy customers here at Comtech, and you can tell when you talk to them that sometimes they do stupid things, but they correct these errors and mistakes within a blink of an eye of a pig or something. It's really quick, and then you have the old guys in Germany going slow.